Hello and welcome to Oddspedia Premier League Match Day 24. We have Arsenal Man City. What a game after the citizens were saved by the bell in the Champions League. Tom Rennie, hello.
Hello, yes they were, but in the end, did we really think Man City weren't going to make it through to the knockout stage of the Champions League? Come on, guys, don't get lulled into that false sense of excitement. They were always going to make it through. The rich were going to get through, and the poor were going out. It's the Champions League.
I have the feeling that these games were pointless, actually, and now the Champions League starts. We were
As it ever was. As it ever was.
Absolutely for nothing. Well, but now we are going to talk about the Premier League and the English clubs, of course, with Tom Rennie and with you guys. So let us know your comments and your tips. And if you fancy to do so, press the like, subscribe. Let's go on now, Tom, with the show. And we start with a great game. Actually, almost every game in this match day is great. In my opinion, Nottingham Forest, Brighton, because we have Forest still third after being hammered by Bournemouth. Remember, they were 8 consecutive games without a defeat before this visit to the Cherries. And Brighton, mid-table, lost to Everton, but they won back-to-back wins away from home against Man United and Ipswich, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe that Forest game last week. I mean, that hasn't happened to Nottingham Forest all season, and the way Bournemouth has ripped them apart was an incredible watch. If you haven't seen it, I actually think people should go back and watch the game again. It was a sensational performance from Bournemouth, and Forest just couldn't cope with what was happening. You know, we've spoken about it a lot this season. If Forest scored the first goal in a game, they're probably going to win that game. They've taken the lead in over 15 games this season and not lost those matches. And I think last week what you saw was just this weird thing that we haven't seen much this season. Forest trailing. How do they play when they're trailing? And against a Bournemouth team who are free-flowing and flying, and Justin Kluivert, they have the informed player in the league. They just tore Forest apart, and you saw it with some of the defending from Murillo in the game. You saw it from some of the defensive cover from midfield. It was all wrong. They got stretched. You don't see Forest stretched. And that was the concern there. But I am seeing that as an anomaly as yet. The overarching pattern here is that Forest is still tough to beat. Forest is still likely to score the opening goal. It is still just one defeat in their kind of last 5 in all competitions. So I still think they go into this game as favourites. And every chance by the end of this weekend, they're back level on points with Arsenal, second in the table or co-second, depending on the Arsenal result. So they won't change anything. There's no real significant injury. Maybe Callum Hudson-Odoi might be missing this weekend, but they still have Gibbs-White and they still have Elanga and they still have the majority of their really excellent front line. So no great concerns there. In terms of Brighton, the loss against Everton last week, I mean, 𝐿𝐵𝗿𝐴 right on that one as well. I thought that would be a draw. They probably should have got a penalty in the last minute because Jordan Pickford punched Van Hecke in the head earlier in the season. That was a penalty for Arsenal against West Ham, but now apparently it's not, whatever. But they still, they lack creativity, surprisingly, Brighton, in a lot of games. I know they've gone on a run of scoring 4, 2 and 3 in the previous few games, but there is just something lacking at the moment with Brighton against a really low block side, which Everton are, which Forest are going to be. That would concern me. A lot of pace, a lot of trickery, but is there enough guile in this team? I think they miss Pascal Gross, who's obviously now off in Germany playing for Borussia Dortmund, who've been such a pivotal part of their team in these sorts of games. And do they have the player to pick the pockets of the opposition? I'm not sure they do. And because of that, games like last week will happen, whereas against Ipswich or against Man United, where it's more open, they can tear you apart. So I think it'll follow a similar pattern to the Everton game as opposed to the Bournemouth game, if you look at the both teams' last week matchup. So take Forest to win at 2.48. I couldn't believe those odds considering how good they've been at home this season. So that's a really, really nice one to take at the top. I do think it'll be quite tight. Again, I'm looking at the Everton game last week as my guide here. Similar tactics, but Forest at home, Forest to win and under 2.5 goals in this match, 5.5. They have been the masters. Think back to the Tottenham game a few weeks ago, Forest, of winning without scoring a lot of goals. So 5.5 is really high. And I know Chris Wood didn't score last week, but it's been a safe bet for much of this season. Chris Wood to score and Forest to win brings you in at 3.5. So 3 nice bets there on this game.
Indeed, Messi is going for Forest draw no bet or Mom Spaghetti 1-0 to Forest. So following also your thinking and talking about great games, Bournemouth, Liverpool, what a game. This one, as you said, Bournemouth have been sensational lately against Forest, but not only there, no defeats since the 23rd of November, 7 wins and 4 draws in that time. So they are very close to the Champions League spots. Probably Slot and the guys were thinking about this game instead of in the Champions League in mid-week, since, for instance, Luis Diaz stayed home after the suffered win in Brentford. Getting the 3 points here also would be crucial for the Reds.
Yeah, I've got to confess, I watched the Man City game and the Villa game last night, so I didn't see how Liverpool got on in the Champions League against PSV. I know the score and saw the goals, but I couldn't tell you much more about it because, as you say, they were through. They'd won the group. There was no real reason for them to risk anyone of note. And it was great, I'm sure, for Arne Slot, king of the balls, to be able to rest 1 or 2 players going into what's going to be a run of games where they could find themselves 8 or 9 points clear in the Premier League title race with 10 games to go. If they do that, I think this might be totally done if it's not done already. There is still the only way we're going to have a title race now is if Liverpool slip up, right? That's the only way. It doesn't matter on anyone else because the gap is so big. And it's games like this where you're like, oh, okay, here we go. It's a season-defining Saturday in the Premier League for Liverpool who go to Bournemouth. Look, the way Bournemouth play, we've spoken about it a lot now. We spoke about it during the Forest game. The intensity of their performance is outrageous. The organisation of their defence has been great. In Howson at centre half, he's been absolutely fantastic. And I think the balance they've got at the back right now, Bournemouth, is great. 𝐿𝐵𝐴 is making saves in goal, rejuvenating his career. Tyler Adams has come back after a long spell out. They've been really gentle on his return, but could be a not world-class player. That's too much, but could be an exceptional player, Tyler Adams. And we've just got to stay fit. Like, can he stay fit? Does he have the body to play Premier League football? This is the run. We're going to find that out. If he can get between now and the end of this season fit and playing like this, yeah, I think absolutely. If he gets injured again, it could be a Jack Wilshere stroll down washout lane. So we'll see what happens with Tyler Adams. I wish him well. And in 𝐿𝐵𝗿𝗏 right now, wow, what a player. The way he's playing, the goals he's scoring. Everyone is frightened to play Justin 𝐿𝐵𝗏𝗏 at this moment in time. And Liverpool won't be any different. They'll need to make plans for him. In terms of Liverpool, away from PSV, which I mentioned I didn't really watch in full, a ground-out win against Lille, a cruise against Ipswich, an incredibly hard-fought win against Brentford. The performance and result against Forest was nothing to be sniffed at. They are picking up points in tough games as well as winning the easy games. They're doing everything you should do if you're going to go on to win the league from this point, and I have no reason to suspect they won't. I think it will be Salah. I think you mentioned Luis Diaz. He will come back in. I think it'll be a very strong lineup. And beyond Curtis Jones, who might be out for this one, it's going to be a pretty full-strength Liverpool team. So that's going to be tough to beat. First and foremost, take the Liverpool win at 1.7. Throw in any 𝐿𝐴𝐴 you've got because they are the favourites to win every game they play. I love the Bournemouth win, though. I don't discount that just because of the odds and the results they've had recently. So that could be your kind of cheeky punt of the weekend, should you fancy. Just go on Bournemouth. It was a 4.6, I think. In terms of individual bets, Mo Salah, the Premier League's kind of leading scorer on 19 goals. He scores and Liverpool win, brings you at 2.5. Not too bad for a Liverpool victory. Plus, it's Mo Salah. He scores in the big games. He scores in the small games. He is having an all-time season. Might, on this ratio of goals to games, get to 37, 38, maybe 40 goals this season if they go deep in the Champions League as well. So he could be on for an all-time season, back that every single week. I think it'll be quite tight. Look at the Liverpool victories against Brentford and against Lille and the game against Forest. I think it will be just shading for Liverpool. So that brings you in a group bet. 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3.5. And also, I know I've said all, but also look at the draw at 4.2. I mean, I can see this being a bit similar to the Forest game, 4.5 now. So, I don't know. I would just shade for a tight Liverpool win with Salah scoring, but don't discount the other options as well if your gut tells you.
Do you know that Patrick Kluivert is the national coach of Indonesia, by the way, recently named?
I didn't know that. Are we doing the quiz round now? No, that's
Yeah.
great. Good for
Yes,
him.
some information. We are not just talking about the Premier League. What is this show about? We have to talk about more things in life. Angelo, Bournemouth are gonna win. Man Spaghetti, the opposite. Liverpool will show class here, and I can see goals and both teams to score. This could be a good option indeed. The next game is Everton, Leicester City. Everton now 7 points away from the bottom three, so no danger for them. David Moyes doing David Moyes stuff. And Leicester, I have to confess, Tom, that someone inside the company, Leicester fan, sent me your clips saying that Leicester were going to lose 6-0 to Spurs after that crazy comeback.
Yeah, well, I didn't see it coming, frankly, and I'm still going to stick with 6-0 for future Leicester games. But what a great result. What a great result for Leicester City. I mean, how they did it. You know, I watched that game in full, and I think I spent the entire time doing this because I couldn't believe what was happening. Like Jamie Vardy, I keep saying this, if Jamie Vardy at 38 can do it, then Leicester have a chance. But if he doesn't, I don't think they do. And he scores one of the goals in the victory over Tottenham last week. And I mentioned 𝐬𝐭𝐴 before. I think he's a good player. I think maybe when they go down this year, which they still will, there'll be some interest in him. But yeah, great result, great performance, and it makes it interesting. Leicester getting out of the bottom three temporarily. I think they will be in it come the end of the season. But look, let's start with Everton here. I think the win over Brighton was classic David Moyes. It was almost classic 𝐷𝗀𝗏 in its way. They had 3 shots in the game, 1 on target, but the goal itself was a penalty, and it was a fair penalty given as well, handball against 𝗀𝗏𝗏. And 𝗙𝗏 scores it, does his brilliant seagull celebration. So beyond that, they're just doing everything they were doing before. Like the Tottenham game was anomalous. This was almost classic 𝐷𝗀𝗏. And it was classic David Moyes. Like he's done this at Brighton. I think last season West Ham won 3-1. It was in the end, but Brighton had like 40 shots and West Ham ran out winners. So the defense looks good. He's brought Brentford in alongside 𝗍𝗏𝗄. He's getting something out of 𝗀𝗏𝗏. In the absence of Dwight McNeil, someone had to step up, and he has. I think the concern here is that it's likely that 𝗷𝗵𝐿 𝐶𝐿 may be missing. We'll see how that goes in terms of fitness reports today. If Beto is up front, I would have a concern about Everton. I think that's a huge drop-off because he's getting something out of 𝗷𝗵𝐿 𝐶𝐿 that we weren't seeing before, which I think David Moyes can do. He's shown over the years many, many, many times. Big, bulky, physical, flick-on merchant striker. He can turn them into goal scorers too. And he's done that with so many players over the years. So positives there for Everton. I think defensively, they're going to be stronger than Leicester City. And if they can nick a goal, then I think they cruise to a win here. Like in terms of Leicester, just to add to what we said earlier on, I think they can always score goals. They've shown that a lot this season in games they've won, in games they've lost. Beyond the games against Fulham and Crystal Palace, which are desperately disappointing, they have shown they're able to score goals. But still with Vardy and 𝗍𝗏𝗏 and an aging front line and a not particularly creative central midfield, I still think they'll struggle in games like this. In this game, I certainly wouldn't look at goals. Even though I've mentioned Leicester are able to score, I think it'd be a smash and grab if they do. So I'd certainly look at the underscore lines. Firstly, Everton win at 1.85. Look at the Brighton game. Look at the loss against Villa. I think it'll be similar to those as opposed to what we saw against Tottenham Hotspur. That was a kind of freak occurrence. Group bet, Everton 1-0, 2-0, 2-1 at 2.88. Just brings it up a little bit. You can't see Everton scoring 3 goals in another match this season. So if they're going to win, it's going to be scoring 2 goals or 1. And then the other thing I found was Everton win to 0 at 3, which is your first double your money bet on this one. I'm thinking Everton against Brighton. I'm thinking Leicester against Fulham, Leicester against Palace. I think Everton win a hard-fought, near unwatchable game, and they don't concede.
Okay. Everton to win. Very difficult, of course, to trust Leicester. Everton at home, but holding off until we see the injuries. Okay, just check the lineups before the game. This battle to avoid relegation right now is between 3 teams, Leicester, Wolves, and Ipswich. 2 teams will go down. Right now, Leicester with 1 point more. So it's a massive game. Next one, Ipswich, Southampton, if they want to stay in the Premier League, Tom, is a must win, because Southampton keep on losing. It's only 1 point in the last 10 games. To be honest, 6 points is pitiful.
Is that your Leicester fan friend calling you to say how annoyed they are with me? Is that what this is? I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I just don't think you're staying up.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
is not realizing at the job that
I wish you well, okay? I'm sorry. What are we doing? Ipswich, Southampton. Look, I won't waste too much time on Southampton, okay? They're going to get relegated. They ain't going to win any games. I think 𝐬𝐿 has come into an impossible job, I'm assuming, for a decent end-of-year bonus. 𝐿𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 scored against, I think he scored against Newcastle or Forest. I forget which game he scored in. But, like, yeah, fine. Look, they might be able to nick a goal now, which they weren't doing previously. But they're conceding 3 goals in every single game. 3 against Brentford, which was 5 in the end. 3 against Man United, 3 against Forest, 3 against Newcastle. So the only thing I'd bet on with Southampton right now is Southampton to concede. 3, I think, might be a bit strong with Forest's, with Ipswich's front line. But we'll see how it goes. But I have no time for Southampton. They're going to go down. In terms of Ipswich, this is the game. This is the most important game of Ipswich Town season. If they can win this game, they're in the mix. You have to beat Southampton. That's rule 1 of this season. You have to whip the whipping boys. And if you don't, you will not achieve your aims this season. The aim of Ipswich is to stay in the Premier League. The performance against Liverpool, look, doesn't matter, really, frankly. You write that game off. The performance against Man City, a little disappointing the way that second half came away from them. But again, when you're 3-0 down at home against City with like half an hour to go, that could happen to anybody. It was the game against Brighton, which I think would mainly concern me. They've won 1 home game this season, Ipswich. No good. That's pathetic. That's pitiful. If you can't win home games, you don't stay up. It's as simple as that. Football's a simple game sometimes. You must win home games. You must win half of your home games. They've not been able to utilize the crowd. They've not utilized home advantage. They've not played in a way that grinds out home wins, which maybe they've needed. There's a lot of respect for 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 and the way Ipswich have played, sure. But they've won 1 game at home. So why would I hire that guy? Whatever players they've got, I want and expect 5 or 6 home wins from every team in the Premier League this season. If not, something has gone drastically wrong. In terms of their players, look, everyone likes 𝐬𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿. I think he'll be back in the Premier League this next season with somebody. I was pleased to see 𝐬𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 score last week. I think he has got promise, but, you know, as a defender, I think he struggled this season. Other players, Amari Hutchinson, 1 or 2 others. Look, they've got some energy about them, have Ipswich Town, but if you're playing Kalvin Phillips in midfield, I think you're asking for trouble. How's it go? Well, I can't bet on Southampton. They are my Norwich. And so I go Ipswich win, even though at 1.98, I can't believe how short that is, considering they've won just 1 home game this season. But if you're going for a top tip, that's what you take. If there is going to be a winner in this game, I think one team will need to outscore the other. I've mentioned that Southampton are scoring consolation goals right now. 1-3, 2-3, 1-3. I think it will follow a similar pattern. So I'd look for 3-1 to Ipswich. That leads me to Ipswich win and both teams score a 3.75. I also think this will be an over scoreline as well, because it will become a bit of a slobber knocker in the end. Both teams so defensively deficient. Ipswich and over 2.5 goals in this match, I think, is good at 3. Southampton have conceded 53 goals this season. Ipswich 47. I'm basing that on bad defense, not good offense.
Well, Messi is also going for Ipswich to win and both teams to score. We saw a draw in the reverse fixture, and Ipswich won both games in the championship last season. It looks like they are going to meet again in the championship next season. But let's see if Ipswich are able to win this one. Thank you, Todd, saying love the shows and the videos. Next game is Newcastle Fulham, 5th. Newcastle, after beating Southampton, we saw Isak scoring a brace. We saw Tonali box to box. And Fulham, be careful, because they are very dangerous when they are the underdog. They lost to Man United, probably deserving more, but it's 4 wins away this season. Could be danger, this one, for Newcastle. Danger.
Yeah, I think it is a tricky game, actually. Yeah. But look, Newcastle, our bet came in last week. They went to Southampton. They scored a couple of goals. Isak scores and Newcastle win. It's come in all but like the Bournemouth game in the last couple of months. So, you know, we'll stick with that. But Newcastle, beyond the Bournemouth result, have been fantastic in the last few months of this season, with the back line back to where it was with 𝗀𝗵𝗏𝗀 and Fabian Schär. The midfield, you mentioned Tonali, but the balance now looks right with Tonali, Bruno, and Joelinton. They've clearly been working on that a lot to try and make their three most talented midfielders work together. And that's a commendation to Eddie Howe and his coaching staff and the players themselves for making that midfield work. 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐵 looks sensational. There was a moment last week, we were watching the game in the green room, and 𝐿𝐴𝐵 had the ball in the penalty area and just sort of stood up straight and almost put his hands on his hips, and he's wearing 14. And you're a bit like, I mean, that's as close to Thierry Henry as we have had since Thierry Henry retired. Just he looks so good, does everything, scores all sorts of goals, nerveless in front of goal. He is the best striker in the division at this moment in time. If you've got that and everything else working around it, no doubt for me they can qualify for Champions League football. I think maybe third, fourth, fifth, all well up for grabs for Newcastle come the end of this campaign. And I'd favour them to do it as opposed to not moving forward. In terms of Fulham, I think what's going to happen here is what always happens to Fulham if they have a good season. It's about to peter out. They haven't won enough games. 23 and 8 wins, not enough as well as they have played. One win in their last 5. Should have maybe got something against West Ham. Should have got something against Man United. Didn't. It's looking a bit uphill for them now. If top 8 finishes for Europe, Villa are currently 8th. Do we think they're going to finish above Villa? I don't. They won't get caught by Palace or West Ham or Spurs. So where they are now, 10th, I expect them to finish there, 10th or 11th. And that might start affecting the players because, you know, we have that cliche, don't we? Time to head to the beach, time to get the sandals on, time to get the sunglasses out, whatever. I think Fulham are edging their way towards that. And I also think, just moving forward, that Marco Silva might think, well, you're never going to get anywhere with Fulham. And I think he will be a manager that a few clubs will be looking at this summer. They just haven't been able to get over the line in games where they've played well. And I think that'll follow here, right? I think their away wins this season have been impressive. The away performances at times have been impressive, but I don't see them going to Newcastle and winning. So Newcastle win 1.72. Take that up front. We've done it every week for 10, so I'm sticking with it. 𝐿𝐴𝐵 to score and Newcastle to win at 2.25. I'm struggling to see Fulham scoring goals at the moment. Only scored 2 against West Ham, I know, but they were both sort of shanked crosses that went in. Really struggled to create last week against Manchester United. A couple of smash and grabbers against Leicester. And I just fancy Newcastle to keep a clean sheet here with their full force defence back. I'm looking at the Wolves game as my guide a couple of weeks ago. I think it'll be similar to that. Newcastle win to nil is 3.25, and Newcastle to score 3 goals. Doubles your money as well. They scored 3 against Southampton, 3 against Newcastle, 3 against Bromley, 2 against Arsenal. I fancy him for 3 goals. That brings you in double your money at 3.
Okay, Newcastle to win, Newcastle and 𝐿𝐴𝐵. Can Newcastle keep 𝐿𝐴𝐵, Tom? Well, they have the money for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they're owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So the only way 𝐿𝐴𝐵 goes is if there's some sort of profitability and sustainability or financial fair play problem, which I don't think there will be. And then 𝐿𝐴𝐵 would need to force a move. If not, you're owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They do not need the money. If Newcastle want to keep him, they keep him. And that's that.
It's a nice golden cage for 𝐿𝐴𝐵, for Tonali. Yeah. Not sure if they are missing the sun up there in Newcastle, but they have plenty of sun to go to wherever they want, of course. Next game, Wolves, Aston Villa. This is a massive game for Wolves because it's now 4 consecutive defeats. They play next Liverpool and Bournemouth. Therefore, their schedule is so complicated. And I guess they can target this game since Aston Villa were playing Champions League on Wednesday. But also, Aston Villa need to win to be in Europe next season. Right now, they are a bit far away. They are 4 points away from Newcastle.
Yes, they are. But I think with the 5 Champions League places that England are likely to get, plus the Conference League, the Carabao Cup winner getting the Conference League position, that looking likely to be a European qualifier already. I think 8 will get you into Europe next season. So I think Villa, they'd be happy to be in the Conference League or the Europa League, I'm sure, because if you're in a competition that Liverpool aren't in, you've got a chance of winning it. And I think that'd be good for Villa fans. Anyway, to this game, look, Wolves, I've mentioned this a lot now. Defensively, awful. Midfield balance with 5 or 6 of the same player, 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲, who's suspended, and Andre and Lamina earlier in the season. Lots of the same player, all sort of buzzing around, but not really box-to-box Premier League players, relying on 𝐷𝗲𝗿𝗲𝗀 at his age to keep having big contributions for you. Offensively, not been impressed really with Strand Larsen, apart from Matheus Cunha. Offensively, they're struggling to score and create and look dynamic. They had that little new manager bounce when Vitor Pereira came in, which was great. Couple of good wins, couple of favourable fixtures, but beyond that, it's all falling apart again. Thought they were poor against Chelsea. Chelsea could have won that by more. Thought they were poor against Newcastle. Newcastle could have won that by more. Thought they were atrocious against Nottingham Forest. Forest could have won that by more. And in both goalkeepers, Sarr's playing now. I think in Jose Sarr, they have a player who's had a monstrous drop-off in form this season. He can barely make a save. So problems defensively and offensively for Wolves. But as you say, got to win this. Have to win this now with Leicester picking up a surprise victory at Tottenham last week. They're in real stuck right now, Wolves, on just 16 points. The only way they're going to do it is blast their way to safety. Are they going to be able to outscore Villa is the big question in this game. Recent form suggests probably not. The only saving moment here for Wolves is that Villa, after the Champions League this season, have struggled. Saw it last week against West Ham. It was a narrow game, as we thought it would be. But in the end, West Ham should have won that last week against Villa because they were fading and fading and fading. They don't have big rotation. They're selling players right now, which is odd looking at the transfer window closing. John Duran might be leaving. Diego Carlos has left. What's his name? Buendia has gone or going to Leverkusen. I don't know where that transfer is in train, but it's happening. So, like, letting players go and then having to bring players in, a few need to be signed before the transfer window closes on Monday, February 3rd. And then you have this scenario where, well, they can't play this weekend. They might not be able to play the following week. So you've got to bed new players in over a period of 3 or 4 weeks. Anana's missing. Pau Torres is missing. It would be a huge effort here for Villa to win. And are they able to do a huge effort? Absolutely they are. But across the season, they have struggled in these sorts of games. So we'll see. I think it screams draw at 3.82. I think I'd look for that as my top tip for this one. I think that Wolves don't have enough to win. Villa might have enough to hold on to a draw. If Villa score early, which they have against West Ham and Celtic in the last couple of games, they could well cruise to victory. Then Wolves will have to push for a goal in Matheus Cunha, 10 goals this season. There's every chance they get one. So screams draw, screams 1-1. Take that at 3.5. If you pick a winner, take Villa at 2.2. And if you're looking for a away Villa win, pick out a goal scorer. Morgan Rogers, I think he looks fantastic at the moment. 2 against Celtic, scored against West Ham in the FA Cup. Rogers to score and Villa to win is 5. If anyone is able to burst through the fatigue blues and carry Villa to victory, it will be Rogers, and take that at 5. I think that might just come in, but a tight game this.
Yes, many people are seeing a surprise here. Mom Spaghetti, Wolves and under. This would be a surprise. Connat's Villa underperformed after the Champions League, so he is not betting on this one. Leo Messi, correct score, 1-2 or 1-3. He is in Aston Villa winning here. Next game, great one, Brentford Tottenham, because Brentford finally won away at Selhurst Park 1-2, but no wins in the last 4 home games where they were very strong. It's true that they had a tough opposition. Now they are super favorites because it's impossible to bet on Tottenham to back them. Now they are 8 points away from relegation. We have to look back. It's only 4 points in the last 10 games, Tom.
Yeah, even though I would say that 8 points is still gargantuan when it comes to trying to stay in the Premier League, right? They aren't going to go down. It's uncomfortably close for them and for 1 or 2 other teams. But look, it would require Wolves and Leicester to go on a run of winning 4 or 5 games in a row. And yeah, sure, maybe that might happen for one of them, even though I don't think it will. It's not going to happen for both. And so I think they'll probably be fine. In terms of Brentford, you picked it out there. I think absolutely that the home form run is over, but they had a great sort of set of fixtures at home for the first half of the season. They played basically nobody in the top half. And when they've started to play top half teams, they've started to lose against Liverpool, against Arsenal, and against Newcastle. And against Man City, they drew. So no surprise there. But this is a game against the struggler full of injury issues who play on Thursday in the Europa League as well. Saw a quote from, I think it was 𝗀𝗄𝗃 this week, saying we've been playing with 8 players. We have 8 fit players over the age of 18 in the squad. Like, what could anybody do in this scenario? And frankly, He's right. Like every team has injury problems, but it's who is injured and how long they've been injured, which has made this incredibly affecting for Tottenham. I know Bournemouth have got players out, but not players of this quality. Bournemouth have nobody of the quality of 𝗵𝗿𝗀𝗀 Solanke. They literally sold him to Tottenham and don't have a replacement, in my view, to Evanilson as good as him. They haven't got anyone as good as Vicario or Van de Ven or Romero. And so it's been more affecting. It's high-class first-team players that have been out for Spurs, plus the additional games of the Europa. So it's been significant. In terms of Brentford, I know they've got players out as well, but in Brian Mbeumo, who scored 14 goals this season, in 𝐬𝐭𝐴𝑤𝐴𝑛 who's in double figures. They've got 2 strikers who can score goals. That's a gift. In 𝐶hristian Norgard, they've got an incredible leader in 𝐿𝐴𝐭𝐴𝑚. They've got someone who's creating now. I have my doubts about 𝐴𝐴𝐾 in totality, but I think currently in really good form. And even in sort of 𝐻𝐵𝐵𝐶𝐵, they've got someone who's coming off the bench and scoring and adding rotation to Brentford. So loads of positives there with the Bees, loads of negatives around Tottenham, who still have lots of players out. And of course, they're on that losing run in the Premier League as well of 9 defeats in 10 league games. Incredible. So the form is the form. You've got to pick Brentford to win at 2.12. Take that. Look at the 2 goal scorers I've mentioned. Wissa to score and Brentford to win, 3.25. And Mbeumo to score and Brentford to win is also 3.25. Also here, I quite fancy goals, only because of the Tottenham defence. They will score Spurs. They often do. But I think Brentford will outscore them. Look at some of the earlier games this season against Wolves. For example, Brentford and over 3.5 goals in this match brings you in at 3.75, which I thought was quite big. If you don't fancy a winner, but you do fancy BTTS, both teams to score an over 3.5 goals is only 2. So a little bit conservative there, but that's what's going to happen here. I think plenty of goals. Both teams are going to get them, and then add your winner on top, and you'll make some money.
Yes, goals and goals, over 3.5 for Messi. Amir is in a draw. Also Hassan going for over 3.5 goals. Of course, don't forget that Tottenham are playing on Thursday, Europa League, and the following week, the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. So perhaps this is the less important game for them. And the next game, we have Man United Crystal Palace. Man United back being favorites for a football game, although the odds are still kind of healthy, 2.15, getting results, but probably not playing great. They were a bit lucky in 𝐻𝐵𝐵𝐶𝐿. In Old Trafford, the form is really poor. 4 defeats in the last 5 games. That's why the odds are still high. Tom, for Man United, Crystal Palace, we don't have to forget that they are dangerous. They lost to Brentford, but they were in form before that defeat.
Yeah, on a great run of away victories as well. 2-0 at Leicester, 2-0 at West Ham. They're able to grind their way through ugly games and get points, Crystal Palace, which is incredibly commendable. The Leicester game was poor. The West Ham game was poor. The Brentford game last week, they lost it, but quality was poor. So in terms of ugly games, both these teams are well-versed in recent weeks. Not one I'll particularly be seeking out to watch this weekend, this particular mid-table clash. Look, Man United won last week against Fulham. Did they deserve it? Maybe, just about on the balance of things, but there's still loads of issues that Ruben Amorim is trying to fix live. It was the first sort of little run of games here where Bruno Fernandes has dropped off in recent weeks. Maybe that's to be expected, the form we've been in before that. Rasmus Højlund, it ain't working. Joshua 𝗍𝗍, it ain't working. I think that hole continues to be a problem for Manchester United. Højlund has done well at points during Amorim's tenure to bring other people in, but I think you need more than that from that player. In this system, you need a 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐵𝐴 and you've got a Højlund. That's a problem moving forward for the club and for the player. And defensively, Lisandro Martinez scored last week, but I do still think he is struggling in a 3. I think Maguire is excelling. I think De Ligt is doing well. But I'm not sure it suits Lisandro Martinez. We'll need to watch that one in the summer to see whether he will stay. A good thing that they're trying to offload Casemiro right now. No business him and Christian Eriksen playing in this team. And 𝗏𝗏 Collier getting some minutes. He needs energy and dynamism, and he's a young player who can run. And young players who can run are incredibly valuable to Ruben Amorim, even above quality, pedigree, and experience. So we'll see what sort of team he puts out here. But I don't expect much from it. I don't expect many shots. If you're an 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐴 person, I expect this to look like it's going to be 1-1 come the end of it. And I think any goal in this game is going to be absolutely crucial. Fulham winning, Man United beating Fulham 1-0. Crystal Palace losing 2-1 last week. They've all been quite tight sort of goals count for double games. which means it screams draw at 3.71. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. And if you're picking a winner, take Man United. The odds on their own are quite good. If they are going to win it, look at a low-scoring, uninspiring, just shady by Man United victory. Under 2.5 goals in a Man U win. The same story as last week against Fulham. Was 5. Really high, I thought. So low-scoring, Man U victory, 1-0, 2-0 at best.
Well, different opinions here. Messi, Crystal Palace draw, no bet. Also, Mam Spaghetti going for Palace, even Palace -1. Melton is going for United to win. And Todd is asking you, Tom, if you like 𝐿𝐭𝐤. This is how you pronounce it?
Yeah, 𝗀𝗵𝐿𝐿, he's okay. I think he's been okay. But I think he just fits in that category right now of we need energy. He is young. Gets around the field, good clearance off the line last week. I'm not too sure moving forward there's going to be a Man United player there. He's going to have a good career, and I obviously hope he does well, but not sure technically. I'm not sure he's as good as kind of 𝐋𝐞𝐿𝐿, who was doing that role last season. So a drop-off there.
Well, James also going for Palace to win. There is not much trust on this Man United. And next game, of course, the best game we have in this weekend, together with Bournemouth Liverpool, is Arsenal Man City. And remember that last season Man City lost at the Emirates. They are winless in the last 3 games to Arsenal. Man City is struggling in the Champions League, but they won. Struggling in the Premier League, but they beat Chelsea. I still don't know what Robert Sanchez was doing. And Arsenal also had a tough game in Europe against Girona and in the Premier League against Wolves, but they all won these 2 tough games. Tom, I loved the goal scored by 𝐶𝐿𝐴, by the way. Great touch.
Yeah, he's got a great goal against Wolves. Nwaneri's got a great goal in the Champions League against Girona. They are scoring really good goals right now, Arsenal, and continuing to be without Bukayo Saka at the moment isn't causing the offensive chaos that maybe we thought it would. So incredibly commendable for Arsenal, who were able to rotate heavily against Girona and rest a few players, which will be great for Mikel Arteta, so we can go into this with players who have not played in a week for the first time in some time. That'll make a big difference. They'll be hoping that Gabriel and Saliba will be fully fit because it's so pivotal to everything Arsenal do. 𝐶𝐿𝐴 being fit, you mentioned his goal, but defensively adds a lot, gives them a good balance. And if Timber is fit as well, it's a brilliant back line Arsenal could put together. Going to be real tough to break through that. Midfield-wise, I expect it to be their strongest group, so I don't expect to see Jorginho. I think it'll be Partey, it'll be Declan Rice, it'll be Ødegaard. So again, strongest midfield, strongest defence, the number 1 goalkeeper. Beyond the issues in the front line, Arsenal base of operations look very strong going into this game. Front 3, obviously a problem because of the injuries they've got. It'll be Nwaneri, it'll be Martinelli, it'll be Trossard. That's what I would expect with Trossard maybe playing in a sort of false 9. We'll see what they do. Or Kai Havertz, forgive me, instead of Trossard, then them 2 rotating as the game goes on. So pretty strong, all told, for Arsenal. Don't have the star player, don't have the star striker. Bukayo Saka being the star player or the star striker. They tried to sign Ollie Watkins this week, if reports are to be believed. If they had Watkins or had even John Duran or had Isak or had 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐻, would I fancy him for a big win here? Yeah, I would. But without that player, the doubts linger. Form has been good. Results have been good. Individuals stepping up, and Bukayo Saka to come back in like a month from now, maybe less. If they're within 4 points of Liverpool going into April, they will fancy it, Arsenal, and there's every chance they can win it. Of course, they would need to beat Liverpool in order to be champions this season, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. In terms of Manchester City, it's tough, isn't it? Like, were they good against Chelsea? No, not really. Like, it was a bit disjointed. If Robert Sanchez doesn't shoot Chelsea in the foot for the 6th or 7th time this season, I think Chelsea are good for a draw in that game. Were they great against Club Brugge? Not really. Kept getting caught on the break a lot in that first half, and Brugge could have been out of sight. Struggled against Paris Saint-Germain. Yeah, fine. Win against Ipswich, deserved to win that. Struggled against Brentford late on. You know, on and I could go here. There's lots of things about City that still aren't quite right. And because of that, I just have my doubts going into a game of this magnitude. De Bruyne doesn't look himself. Haaland doesn't look particularly prolific at this particular moment in time. And defensively, still, the mistakes that they're continuing to make with 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐻 and ACCA, the back door just seems to be swinging open all the time. John Stones going to midfield. Looked a bit more solid against Brugge in midweek. But is he fit enough to get through 90 minutes? I don't know. Marmoush was all right last week. Not sure if he's going to be able to come in and make a massive impact immediately. And 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐻 at centre-half. I mean, if he's playing in this game, all bets are off. Go straight to Arsenal, an Arsenal big win. He looks like a rabbit in the headlights playing in the Premier League, the 20-year-old 𝗀𝗵𝐻𝐻 centre-half. I feel bad for him. He got thrown right in at the deep end. So I don't know how good a player he is all in, but going to be tough for him at the moment to excel in the Premier League. So on current form, you would just shade for Arsenal. They've been fantastic at home this season. The Gunners, no defeats, 7 victories, 4 draws, only 9 goals conceded. Away from home, City have had their struggles this campaign. And in the last few weeks as well. I mean, it's 4 defeats away from home this campaign. Could have lost against Brentford as well. So Arsenal win, a 2.15. Take that. I like that a lot. I think City will score, but I think Arsenal will outscore them. And so Arsenal and both teams to score. I like that at 4. Really good. Look at the Tottenham game. Look at the Girona game. They do leak a goal every now and then, Arsenal. And so I quite fancy that. Group bet, tight game, 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, Arsenal, 3.5. If you do fancy Man City, I was really surprised to see City draw no bet at 2.5. That's really high for Man City. You don't get those sorts of odds on that sort of thing often. So I'd take that. If you fancy Man City, cover the spread there on the draw. And as ever, take a corner bet with Arsenal. 7 corners for Arsenal is 2.63. 8 was your first double your money. So start at 7 and then work your way up by corners there, depending on how brave you are. If you go 10, it's like 5 for Arsenal to get 10 corners, 5.5. So it might be worth it. Might be worth it. But just shade for Arsenal in a narrow game here.
Well, the odds for Man City are massive indeed, 3.7. That's why also Messi is going for Man City draw no bet. Although many people think that this is going to be an Arsenal win or 𝗀𝗻𝗻𝗀, for instance, boring draw and under. But Man Spaghetti also following the current form, no way I'm trusting Man City. Well, and for Monday, we have a good game, actually. Chelsea, West Ham, with Chelsea only 1 win in the last 7 games, with Graham Potter going back to Stamford Bridge, and with West Ham drawing last game in Villa Park. Tom, how do you see this one?
Tricky, actually. I think with Chelsea, the performance against Man City was massively disappointing. I think having led in that game, they really, really faded. I think Caicedo in central midfield with no Romeo Lavia, which is the story again for this game. The balance they had in their brilliant run over December and the start of January is gone. And again, the doubts come in about Caicedo and Enzo as a pair in central midfield, which I think we've all had a lot beyond that run. Cole Palmer didn't impact the game. I think he will here, but was very poor last week. And up front, you know, Nicholas Jackson's had some poor moments. Christopher Nkunku has been almost anonymous during his time at Chelsea. And so lots of concerns offensively and defensively. Look, I like Trevoh Chalobah. I think he's a good player, but is he supposed to come back from a loan at Crystal Palace and look like Chelsea's best centre-half? I'm not sure that was in the script, but he does. What that says about 𝐿𝐴𝐧𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐜 and Badiashile and Fofana and all the other guys they played there, well, it doesn't say much about them, let's put it that way. And I think at fullback too, Reece James looks like someone who's coming back from a long-term injury. If I was Malo Gusto, I'd be a bit miffed that I've been dropped for Reece James, considering he hadn't done much wrong and James hasn't done much right. So that would kind of annoy me. But in terms of Chelsea away from the City game, it was 4 games without defeat. It was a couple of games they probably should have won. Bournemouth and Wolves, when they drew, when they did. Palace away, they struggled, got something from that. There is a steal about Chelsea, which I think is impressive. It isn't going to qualify them, I don't think, for the Champions League, the way things are currently going, unless they can win games like this. They need someone like Nicholas Jackson to return to form. In terms of West Ham, amongst the kind of disasters there have been this season, there have been some really good away points. Villa last week adds to Bournemouth, where they drew. You know, Forest has got spanked there. They've drawn at Fulham this season, West Ham, drawn at Brentford, drawing Brentford's imperious run at the start of the season. So they have, weirdly, shown the ability to get a draw in games like this across the season. Because they were on Monday, West Ham will be desperately hoping that 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐻𝐿 Summerville is fit. Not having his pace from the break has led them to look pretty just one-paced, frankly, in the team. And it will give Graham Potter an option he desperately needs. If that happens, I think 𝗀𝗄𝗃𝗃 goes back into the defensive 3 that Graham Potter clearly likes. Mavropanos, I know he's a disaster zone, but he comes back into a defensive 3. That gives you 𝗀𝗄𝗃𝗃, Kilman, and Mavropanos, 3 actual centre-halves, which they didn't have last week. I think that's going to be a positive for West Ham. Summerville on one side. Gives an Emerson on the other, former Chelsea player, gives you good balance. Midfield with Thomas Souček and another. That another is an issue for West Ham at the moment because no one's really been good enough. Probably 𝐻𝐸𝐺𝐷. Then Paqueta playing up front with Kudus as well. There's a good balance about West Ham, which wasn't there a few weeks ago. And I wouldn't say I was positive about them, but at the very least, I think Graham Potter is going to be able to get them the draws and the couple of wins required to get them safety and just move on from this season, which I think all West Ham fans are desperate to do. In terms of the game, screams draw, 5.8. Can't believe how high that is, considering Chelsea have struggled in games like this, Palace and Bournemouth recently. So take that at 5.8. If you do fancy Chelsea, win up and down 1.41 is not amazing. So take Chelsea winning both teams to score at 2.5. Wouldn't be amazed to see West Ham score first here and Chelsea to go on to turn it around, which they've done in this fixture quite a few times in the not too recent past. So look at both teams to score. Look at the under. I'd say draw. 𝐿𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐵 for Chelsea.
Great odds to back West Ham somehow with an Asian handicap plus, for instance, +1, +1.5. We have 𝐻𝐸𝐺𝐴 going for +1.25 indeed, +2 for Hassan. So great odds on West Ham. Tom, remember, of course, guys, that we have our tipster competitions going on, including the Premier League one, where you can win some cash money, and also that we have rivals where you can create, there you go, sorry, I'm going too fast, where you can create your own tipster competition. Well, Tom, tell me your safe bet.
It's tricky this week. There aren't too many safe bets to be had. No. Even the Liverpool game is one I'm going to avoid this week. I'm taking Newcastle as my safe bet this week as the most likely home win in the Premier League this weekend. I know Fulham are a good team, but I think Newcastle will be too strong for Fulham. Take that at 1.67.
It's a tough weekend, as I said at the beginning. And the ACCA?
ACCA is a double this week. I'm throwing Newcastle in there because the odds are quite good. You add Nottingham Forest to that to win against Brighton, two games I really fancy. I was surprised to see that at 4. That's a really healthy double. So that's it for me this week.
Okay, Tom, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for watching. See you next week. Bye. Bye.